Hi, my name is Dan Gomez, and this is Mental Health Super Omnia, mental health above all. We identify and understand mental health issues and the paths for help. Today, we want to talk about letting go of your ex. We have two guests with us today. First, Cortney Warren. Cortney is a board-certified clinical psychologist. She's an expert in eating pathology, addiction, self-deception, and cultural diversity in psychology. I believe you're an adjunct at UNLV or an adjunct somewhere. You're going to be able to correct me. I know you have written approximately 50 peer-reviewed journal articles. You've given a TED Talk and written at least 2 books in multiple book chapters. Next, we have Erica Kawamura. Erica has a doctorate in psychology, PsyD, board certified in lifestyle medicine, brings over 20 years of experience, and is part of the Equilibrium Psychological and Consultation Services leadership team. She provides therapy to adult clients and to help them improve their well-being, lead more fulfilling lives, and work toward their personal goals. Cortney, we have read your book, and I apologize. I normally hold up a copy of the book, but I read yours on the Kindle. We've read your book, Letting Go of Your Ex. It was great reading, and it provided a lot of good tools. It really shed light on why some people get stuck. Could you briefly frame up for us the 3 sections of the book and then focus a bit on red flag thinking?
Of course. Well, thank you for having me. I love talking about this topic because the reality is that almost every human is going to go through a really rough breakup at some point in their life. And we're also very likely to break someone else's heart. So we can't get out of this life without having immense, total, obsessive adoration of someone else. And at some point, it's very likely that that is going to send us crashing down to reality in a painful mess of trying to unpack it when the relationship ends. So thank you for talking about this with me. So I wrote this book, Letting Go of Your Ex, in 3 main sections because I think about breakups really almost like you're getting cut, like you are ending up in the ER and you have this, bleeding, gushing wound. So the first phase of the book is really about how to stop the bleeding, how to really understand what symptoms you're having and how to stop the continual gush of pain that is emerging in the moment because you are breaking up with someone that theoretically means a lot to you. The second section of the book is the next step, which is how did you get cut in the first place? How did you get here? So in this section, it's much more about how do I understand myself? What did I get cut with? What am I bringing to my romantic relationships that are leading me into continual heartache in kind of systematic patterned ways that really only I can understand as a person? And the third phase is healing. It's, okay, I have a scar. I've figured out how to manage my symptoms. I'm understanding what I brought to the table to get myself here. I probably am always going to have a scar, but I can learn to see it differently. And I can actually learn from this experience that was really traumatic and difficult potentially for me in the moment in ways that really present me with growth and learning and a better future actually for myself and any romantic relationships that I might enter into. So those are the 3 main sections of the book. I think you asked me about something else.
Red flag thinking. Kind of introduce red flag thinking for us.
Okay. So red flag thinking is really very characteristic of humans, and it's the way that we distort reality. So often we want to think that our thoughts are true, that we as humans, anything that I think must be accurate, right? Because I'm thinking it, so I'm right. But the truth is that a lot of what goes through our minds as humans is actually very unhelpful and very faulty. And so red flag thinking is learning to observe yourself enough to see your thoughts, write them out on paper and analyze them. And when you see that your thinking patterns are unhelpful or untrue, cognitive restructuring, what we would call it, or really re-examining our thought processes is part of the healing after a breakup. And it's actually a wonderful tool to use with any symptoms that someone might be having that are distressing, because so often our thoughts will drive our negative emotions and drive really unhelpful behavior patterns. And as we understand our thoughts, then we can work with them and we can shift them and challenge them to ensure that they actually are more congruent with reality.
Right, and then like that thought leads to others, and you just spiral, and it just maintains you to be stuck.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, like, in your book, you also talk about like this love addiction piece that follows the breakup. And, I like the way you described it, because you bring in like this neurobiological way where these people that are in pain, right? Like they might be really hard on themselves of like, why am I still obsessed with this person when, they might have been really abusive or harmful, or maybe they just weren't the right fit, right? And or their lifestyle differences, and or maybe you were the one that broke up with them, and yet why are you the one still stuck? And so I feel like the neurobiology part helps to help them understand. And I think that's one of your red flags you talked about, was that emotional reasoning, where I feel this emotion so strongly, so therefore I am, or therefore must be true. And so, yeah.
Yes. One of the reasons that I like to think about love as an addictive process is that many humans who come into therapy are struggling in their romantic relationships. And especially after a breakup, there are so many faulty red flag thoughts about themselves because of the breakup itself. So things like, I'm never going to find somebody else, or they're the only one for me, or they're the best person in the world, or they're the worst person in the world, that there is this obsessionality to our falling in love processes that is actually biologically driven, that is actually very hormone dependent, and normalizes people's experiences such that they don't think they're as crazy. And I can say, you know what? It makes a lot of sense that you're feeling out of control and emotional and constantly craving this person, wanting to go back, wanting to talk to them, wanting to get back together, wanting to relive these experiences, wanting to brush your teeth with their toothbrush, because you're craving contact with them. And that's actually really a biological experience to any addictive behavior, because this person was the most important thing in your life for a while, and now they're not there. And so your reaction actually makes sense. Now we're going to work with it. Now we're going to try to unpack that and understand that, so that you feel empowered again. And you remember that you are still you, whether your ex is in your life or not. Your value comes from within you. It doesn't come from anything outside of you, including your relationships.
So how does one like move from that intense emotion, right? And then to, you had talked about like the pause. What's the thought? And then let's restructure that thought. And then, get yourself more into a grounded, stable place, especially because, when you're having those strong emotions, and yes, you're craving them, like the neurobiological need, but in addition to it, people don't like to feel bad. They want to get rid of the, they want to get rid of the pain. How do I stop being in pain? Right. Well, if I'm back with this person, then it makes it go away. And then, if I'm breaking up, then I have to think about, all those things that you talked about, right? Am I unlovable? Am I going to find anybody else? What did I do wrong? Like if I had done X, Y, Z, they would have stayed. I don't want to be alone. I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life, right? All of those different false assumptions that you had listed. Yeah. So how does one move from that, shift from that one faulty to the next?
Yeah. Gosh, even just reminding all of us that life is really hard, and that you have to move through the breakup. You aren't just trying to get over your ex. You're trying to let go of the experience in a way that helps you evolve and grow. And so I think really phase one, the first part of treatment, imagine anyone who's coming in, they're going through a bad divorce, they're going through a difficult breakup. Maybe they wanted it, maybe they didn't, but no matter what, probably their whole life is changing in some meaningful ways. The first step is to help them manage that pain. And, the reality is we can't make it go away, but you can learn from it and you can learn tools to help yourself through it. So cutting off contact is one of the first things that I recommend to anyone who I am working with, where the truth is that contact with an ex or contact with the current lover that you're trying to break up with is just going to keep you focused on them and fixated on them and going back to them. So learning to set really clear boundaries that I am actually over here and you are over there, which is a kind of a core tenet of codependency, that this is what I am going to do for myself because I need to start healing from this experience. And so when I think about you, I'm going to practice skills like thought stopping and rumination time. I'm going to give myself 20 minutes to sit here every morning after I wake up and the tears are starting to come and I want to check my phone and I see that you haven't texted me. I'm going to give myself 20 minutes and all I'm going to do is feel every feeling that I can possibly muster. I'm going to think about all the broken promises. I'm going to think about your cheating experience. I'm going to think about all the things you said to me. I'm going to think about all of it and I'm going to feel all my feelings. And after 20 minutes, I'm going to stop doing that because I have to go on with my life and I'm going to practice thought stopping. As I get in the shower and practice some self-care and get my coffee, I'm going to remind myself of my mantras that I can get through this, that I'm still me, that I'm not willing to devote my life to someone who actually isn't in it anymore. You practice those kinds of skills, including distress tolerance, which is directly related to what you're asking too, where you're going to feel some pain. You're going to feel uncomfortable. There are going to be triggers in your life that you're hopefully going to learn about over the course of therapy, and certainly is something that I talk about in this book, where things are going to emerge and your ex is going to pop into your mind, or you're going to want to cry, or you're going to want to reach out. Sitting with that feeling and not trying to make it go away, not trying to sugarcoat it, having some radical acceptance of who you are, of who they are, of the fact that you're in this situation as much as you might wish you weren't. You are. And you're going to learn every day. The more you practice these kinds of skills, you're going to learn self-efficacy. You're going to learn that you actually can get through this, that you are actually worthy of getting through this, that you actually aren't defined by this breakup as much as in the moment when we have a challenge or a trauma or something difficult happen. It feels like that period of time in our life defines our whole life, right? It feels like we can get very stuck in the present moment. But over time, as you practice, you remember, actually, this is one part of a much larger life journey that I'm on. It's one thing that I'm going to get through, and I'm going to become stronger as I prove to myself that I actually can get through this.
Right, like just because you feel like you need that person, it doesn't mean that you need them. And also, like, how did you function before you met that person, right?
I'm sure you did.
Yeah.
You had a whole life. You were starting to understand yourself. There's a large section in the second part of this book on self-deception as well, which is sort of integrated throughout because it's one of my areas of expertise.
Yeah.
So how do we lie to ourselves? And the reality is that we lie to ourselves all the time about all kinds of things, but they generally are going to be most present where we're most insecure. And when it comes to romantic relationships, one of the first areas that I see massive lying is the beliefs that you hold about your ex. that there is such a strong push to think that they were the best. There is such a strong pull to either idealize them or devalue them. And based on which side of that you fall on during a breakup, to think that that actually means something about you as a human being. That I'm never going to get over this, or I'm not enough, I'm not lovable, I'm not safe, I am not worthy of being close to someone, I should never be in an intimate relationship because I'm only going to get hurt. And when we start to unpack some of those self-deceptive beliefs that are often very influenced by early childhood experiences and early childhood learning, then we start to get to this core second part of therapy and of evolution and of healing that is really more about solidifying for people that the breakup actually has almost nothing to do with your ex. Your experience of healing requires nothing of them. It is all about looking in the mirror and understanding yourself and exploring yourself, who you are, where you're insecure, where you're vulnerable, what you learned that fundamentally may not be true, but you believed it was true. And so you lived your life according to those beliefs, even if they were completely false, and they will be brought into your romantic relationships, maybe more than any other relationship you have in your life, because of the nature of romantic love. Romantic love is not rational. It's not deliberately decided. It is so rare that you could give me a laundry list of things that you love about someone, and you think that this is the person I should date. They have to have this and this and this and this. And then I hand you that person and you're like, I'm really not attracted to that person. Yes, that's true. This is really the journey of understanding yourself and how you relate to other people and what it's like to be intimate and to be vulnerable and to be in situations where you feel powerless because you're letting someone into this inner world that's incredibly private, and into a physical world that you probably don't share with a lot of people, and into a sexual experience that may be incredibly unique, that stimulates all kinds of things in your body and brain, that led you to fall in love and at some point see, I'm in love with this person and they don't love me, or I'm in love with this person and it's not going to work for all of these reasons that I know it's not going to work, but this hurts so much to end that I'm fighting it. Or any variant of it's not going to work because it's not the right time, or we don't want the same life, or I'm moving away, they want children, I don't, whatever it is. So much of a functional romantic relationship isn't about things you can control. So the journey of healing is about understanding yourself and healing yourself and bringing that evolved person into your next romantic relationship in a way that hopefully doesn't recreate dysfunctional patterns that you might have brought to this one.
Right.
You focus right now on the faulty beliefs about your ex.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was talking to people, one thing that kept coming up is the concept or the thought that my ex will change.
Oh,
And when I was talking to people that hadn't broken up, that they were in a relationship or they were in a new relationship, the one thing that kept coming up is he's going to change or she's going to change. He'll learn to put the cap on the toothpaste. He'll learn to pick his towel up off of the floor, or she'll learn to whatever. So this idea of they will change it's just consistent in a relationship and outside of the relationship. It just is there some reason why we don't get it?
Yes, we want to believe that we have more control over other people than we do. The truth is that we have no control over other people, and that your mate or your ex will change because they choose to. And that's it. So this faulty belief, which is so common, that either they will change or I will change them, is only going to keep you mired in a reality that is fundamentally untrue. And I really, really strongly believe that our goal as human beings is to become as brutally honest with ourselves as possible. Because the more honest you are with yourself about who you are and about who your mate is, the more freedom you have to create the life you want to live based on the choices that you need to make. And so that freedom is magical. It's what's empowering to us. It's what makes us uniquely human, this big cortex that we have that allows us to make choices separate from our instinct and separate from our desires, that we can overcome a biological drive because we think it's the right choice, right? But you want to make choices based on real information, based on the truth with a capital T. And so a better question when someone comes in and says, well, I'm going to make them change or they're going to change is, let's assume that they don't. Now what? Are you going to choose to stay? Are you going to choose to leave? Is it some middle ground? And for some people, the answer is, you're right. They might never change, and I still choose to stay. And so instead of being miserable and upset with my partner all the time because they're never going to put the toothpaste cap on, I'm going to accept that you're right. They probably aren't. And so instead of getting frustrated about that, I'm going to say, well, that's who they are. And I choose to stay anyway, so I'm going to stop being upset about it.
And that's a choice, right?
And
Because you're
that's a choice.
choosing. Yeah. And right, because you can be miserable during the relationship because of all this frustration and everything because they're not changing. And then, you're beating yourself up and feeling upset afterwards because they didn't change. And
Yes.
yeah.
So the crux of this is the only person you can change is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of thinking that they're going to change or you can change them, what we really need to do is say, how can I change myself to accept this reality? Hopefully in a way that's healthy for me and in a way that's positive for me. And that is actually incredibly empowering. I think one thing that happens as psychologists, as therapists, which I'm sure you also know, Erica, is that sometimes people come into therapy and they have a tendency to repeat the same miserable story about a life reality over and over and over. And from my perspective, I can be pretty tough as a psychologist. I guess I should couch by saying that. But I ethically don't believe that it makes any sense for me to let you do that very long.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely want to listen and understand you. But pretty quickly, I am going to say, I've heard you say this a number of times, and I hear that it's really upsetting to you. So now what?
Mm-hmm.
What are we going to do about this? What are you going to do with this information? This is now a choice. If you continue to stay and you just want to rehash the repeated negative realities, it's not healthy for you. You have to take a stand, either accept something that's difficult and stop being miserable about it, or you're going to have to do something differently. And that's kind of the crux of the human condition. And it certainly relates to romantic relationships.
Yeah, because earlier you had said that, like our core beliefs and what are, how we believe ourselves to be, and then how we assume, the relationships we got from the early experiences, that really drives probably like these patterns of relationships and behaviors because it's familiar and things. So, I mean, this is all like hard work, like you were saying.
It's such hard work.
Yeah.
And, I think most of us have probably been there at some level.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I ask the average person, most of them have been through a really tough breakup and will say, I remember what that felt like.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes it's their first love. Oftentimes, it's that memory of the euphoria. This is the addictive part of love. That I met them and I couldn't stop thinking about them, and I wanted to touch them, and I wanted to be with them. I wanted to plan a life around them. I wanted a future with them. It's this magical, pretty fantasy-based, but
Yeah.
euphoric, physiological love. And a lot of it isn't really true. And so as we learn about the person and we learn about ourselves in that context, we are often confronted with these core beliefs that we hold about, well, what does real love look like in practice? What does a healthy romantic relationship really look like? And what am I bringing into these relationships based on my early childhood learning that repeatedly leaves me with this kind of a partner, or having this pattern in my relationships? I oftentimes use myself as an example, because when I first started dating, I found it incredibly painful, incredibly difficult. And at the time, I couldn't have explained to you why, because I wasn't self-aware enough. I didn't have enough experience to understand. But I came from a divorced family, as many people do, with quite a dysfunctional parental relationship. My parents had a very tumultuous divorce and a very violent relationship when they were married. And I learned unconsciously that really romantic love is not safe. That if you fall in love with someone and you're in a relationship, they're either going to leave you or they're going to hurt you. And I brought those beliefs into my dating experiences without understanding that at all, right? And that's what we all will do. We will bring whatever it is that we believe about ourselves, about other people, and about romantic love with us as we start dating. And so I'd find myself dating people that I thought were really nice or were really interesting, but I could not attach to them. I never trusted them. I went into every romantic relationship distrustful of my mate, which is not a good way to start a relationship, because at some point they're going to look at you going, but I haven't done anything. And at some point you look at yourself and you say, you're right. So what is the deal? This is what I mean by exploring our core beliefs that you're talking about, exploring what is it that I have learned that I am bringing with me into my relationships that probably influence who I choose to date. That's another topic, right? But also influence how much I can even be a healthy dating partner to anyone. Because if I go in not trusting anyone, or believing it's always going to end, or fearing that I'm going to be left, which are common characteristics of anyone who has had early childhood trauma, it's going to emerge in how you are with anybody that you date in ways that are generally quite negative. For example, being really needy, asking, do you love me? Wanting assurances that it's going to work, wanting the person to really spend all of their time and focus with you. When we think about that from a relationship perspective, those are actually pretty big red flags. You actually don't really want a mate who defines themselves by you. You don't really want to need someone else such that you don't feel good enough on your own. Right? These are things that if a couple came into therapy with me, I would say, okay, I see this dynamic. This person is needy and coming at you and wants reassurances, which oftentimes makes the other partner pull away and become more avoidant and become more back off. This is too much for me, which of course then makes the love addict want to come in closer and become more and more and more. And that dynamic is pretty common.
Right. And then therefore reinforcing the I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy. Yeah.
All of that.
Right. And you start to wonder, like, is it really about the person that you're missing or you love? Or is it the idea of that, or the need that this person is fulfilling? And that could be anybody, right? Yeah.
All of those things. And that's a
bring
pretty
gender-
common. Go ahead.
Let's bring gender into this just for a second. Okay. Because when I absolutely wanted to make sure we got to the harmful childhood learning about love that you described, okay, from your personal experience. And the reason I want to bring gender into it is because sitting back, one might wonder, gee, is this dominated by one gender, or can somebody else, can guys have that same feeling? It turns out, I actually know somebody who has a very similar story to yours and actually refuses to get married for that very reason. Long-term relationship with a woman I know, refuses to get married. So is there a gender component to this, or is it gender free? It can happen to men.
I have two main answers. The first is that any human can fall in love and feel addicted to their mate. Male, female, transgender, bisexual, any iteration of how you identify. I think this is a very human experience to fall in love and become obsessively fixated on a mate, which, to be honest, is really a magically wonderful, it's probably the best high you're ever going to get naturally as a human. And when the relationship is healthy and when it's going well, it can be amazing to be in love and to be attached and to feel like you're daydreaming about the person, right? So falling in love isn't inherently a negative thing. It can be amazing. And it can happen to anyone. What I would also say about gender, though, is that we are all cultural beings. We are born into a cultural context, into a familial context, into a social context that will hold very core values and ideals for gender roles. So, for example, in the United States, generally speaking, women are valued for being caretaking, for being beautiful, actually above anything else. As someone who specializes in eating disorders as well, I will tell you that the sociocultural environment that we live in the United States that really values women first and foremost for what they look like, and that the ideal appearance is to be young and thin and habitually 18 with a perfect figure for your entire life, sets us up as a sex, as a gendered-based experience for a whole host of negative outcomes. But taken in the context of relationships, there are lots of cultural messages about what makes a woman valuable that will play into potentially how she approaches a relationship romantically. Because if you think I have to look a certain way and I should be more gentle and more docile and more caretaking, you will probably bring that into your romantic relationships unconsciously again. It's not that you deliberately intend to do that. It's that that's what you would have learned by growing up in a social and cultural context that says, this is what makes you valuable as a female. For men, the ideals aesthetically are very different. Your appearance is still very important, but it's much less important than your brain and your money from a cultural perspective. So for men, you need to be more aggressive. You need to be more dominant. You need to have power. And if you have power and get the beautiful, ideal woman, then from a social perspective, you're winning. You've won. And so I think that unpacking your own experiences in romantic relationships and in breakups especially means that you want to explore what you've internalized, what you have personally accepted to be important to you because of your gender. And whether there is something about being female that maybe you learned that you don't stand up for yourself, or you don't have needs, or your needs don't matter as much as your partner's needs if they're a man, because that's what you internalize. That's what you learned. That's what you saw from your parents or from your religious background or from the sort of watching your friends and family members operate, that was the way that your parents did it. So you have learned that that's the way that you should be. Well, if you learned that, it's very likely that in your romantic relationships, it will be hard for you to articulate who you are and what your think that your needs matter to your partner, to be able to say, well, this is who I am, and this is something that's really important to me. And I want you to understand that. That might be almost impossible for you to say. So that's a long-winded answer to say, I think gender matters greatly to the degree that you have learned something about how you should be based on your gender role.
And I can see that dyad, right? Like they're going to naturally be attracted to the more aggressive, assertive, not necessarily controlling, but just like, who calls all the shots, right? And then come a point where they're not happy, they start to verbalize their needs and things. And then because that dynamic was just established, or that person is not willing, they're used to being in control of things. It's not well appreciated. And
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a ton of biological data, right? Which I think is probably relatively controversial as a topic at the moment in the world. But there is data on testosterone. There is data on how biologically, from an evolutionary perspective, biological men are sort of designed to spread their seeds, to not want to be monogamous potentially, because biologically they're driven to procreate in a different way than women, whereas women are actually at great vulnerability when it comes to sex, because if they get pregnant, they are the ones who have to survive and carry the baby and raise the baby. So depending on who you ask, you might get some of those answers as well.
Right. And also just the attraction level too, where the strong, independent, assertive women, like, they scare off the men, or,
Yes.
A lot too. Yeah.
And at the end,
be more feminine, I guess.
I think the third part of the book, which is really more about where do you go from here, right? You've had a bad breakup. You are trying to figure out what's next. So much of that is about exploring your values and exploring what you care about, who you want to be. And if you can emerge from that more authentic, where you're more honest with yourself about who you are and why, and making choices about how you want to live based on an authentic view. Like, for example, as you just said, I am a pretty independent, assertive woman, let's say someone is. And so I don't really want to change that about myself. And that flies in the face of the gender roles that I was raised with. And it flies in the face with some of the men that I date who really would prefer that I'm not that way. But the truth is, this is how I am. This is who I am. And this is how I want to live my life. And that means I have to date people who are comfortable with that. And if they aren't, they're probably not a very good fit for me anyway. Or your friend who's decided he doesn't want to get married. After doing a really thorough, deep dive into yourself, if that's the choice that you make, it actually might be the best choice for you, right? And in some really profound existential way, I believe that it is up to each human to figure that out. And that I can't possibly tell you how you should live your life or who you should date. I could tell you some things that I would say are associated with negative psychological outcomes. So I would recommend you not date someone who verbally or physically abuses you. I would suggest you not get into patterns of relationship dynamics that are clearly cutting your self-esteem and making you feel objectively badly about yourself. But aside from those things, this journey of life is about knowing yourself and then finding people that you want to surround yourself with because they are enjoyable, because they enable you to grow and learn, because they also love you and are giving you constructive feedback from a place of shared experiences, not to cut you down or make you into something that you're not. So I think owning that, owning yourself, owning who you are unapologetically, while shifting things that you say, gosh, I kind of am like that, and I don't like that about myself. I need to work on that. That's also part of the journey. And ideally, our relationships actually hold up a mirror to our face that say, oh gosh, I didn't even know I was like that, and I am. And wow, that's an issue. I got to work on that. If I'm going to have a successful relationship, me, Dr. Cortney Warren, I better work on my issues with trust, because I'm never going to have one if I don't start healing that part of myself first.
But it is kind of difficult, isn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, some people, they flourish no matter what environment they've come from, right? I know a woman who, quite frankly, she told me she grew up in a trailer park. And she said, all the worst things you've ever thought about a trailer park, my life was worse than that. It's like, I really didn't want to hear too much more than that. But she became a very successful executive and a very successful, happy person. Okay. Many other people can't do that. So how do you separate yourself away from the family messages that you've just internalized over the years? How do you do that?
One day at a time, 1 minute at a time sometimes. I think as mental health communities, we hear some of the worst stories of humanity that anyone will ever hear. To your point, some of the stories that I have heard from clients, and I'm sure the same for you, Erica, are absolutely heartbreaking. Absolutely the worst of human nature. Absolutely the things you want to believe could never happen to someone else. And I am always going to come back. Now what? This happened. That's horrific. Life is hard. Even when life is amazing, life is hard. It's going to eventually fall to you to craft a life that you want to live or not. And staying in a situation where you are victimized, disempowered, blaming past experiences for present misery is only going to leave you living a life that is miserable. So 1 minute at a time, we're going to take baby steps that are aimed at lifting you up, that are aimed at building your self-esteem and your identity and your self-worth, such that eventually, over time, it's going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And there will come a day where you will no longer tolerate things that bring you down anymore. And I wish there was a big answer I could give you, like you just, hit yourself over the head and say, I'm not doing this anymore. For some people, hitting rock bottom has to happen for them to change their life, where they have to hit a point where they say, I actually can't live like this anymore. I actually am either going to do something differently or I'm not going to survive this. But for a lot of people, it's having a difficult experience like a breakup or a divorce or some major life event, losing a job or failing at school, that leads them to reanalyze their life and reanalyze their choices and say, what am I doing? A typical midlife crisis, which happens to a lot of people. How did I get here? Why am I married to this person? Why am I not parenting this child very well? Why are they struggling? Why is my relationship with my mother so bad? Hitting a point where you really are confronted with yourself.
Right, thinking like this isn't working anymore. Like you said, like something's got to change. And, that whole thing of keep doing the same thing, you'll have the same patterns, the same outcomes, and waiting, right? Waiting for something positive or luck to happen, right? You might be waiting a long time, but like you said, the empowerment piece. And I think like a while back earlier on, you'd said, like the anger and the resentment and letting go of that to move on. A lot of, something else I'm sure is common is people faulty belief tell themselves, I'll hate him. And, I don't know, just like try to like use like come up with all the things that they hate about him and all the things that, he or she did wrong. Right. And then to get over the ex. But I'm like, no, but you're still a lot of emotionally activated, and, yeah.
So true. I think there is a tendency, depending on how the breakup went, to want to villainize an ex. I see it a lot in kind of brutal divorces as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the reality is that love and hate, as you just mentioned, are essentially versions of the same thing. There's a tremendous amount of emotion involved in both.
Right. You're still thinking about revenge fantasies now.
Yes. You're actively reacting. This person is actively in your mind. If you every day wake up and think all the hateful thoughts and how you want to get back at them, you are still completely focused on this person. So the opposite of love and hate is really indifference. The goal eventually of any breakup is for this person to have no power in your life anymore.
Mm-hmm.
For you to look at the past relationship and look at them and even interact with them and think, at one point you were really meaningful to me, hopefully in a loving way. At one point, I really hated you. I wanted nothing to do with you. And now I just see you as an important experience that taught me a lot about love and myself.
Yeah, and I love that you said it's kind of like that grieving process that I often talk about with, what do you want to take with you? And, what did each relationship teach you about yourself and about your next relationship, your wants, your needs, your likes, right? And then what do you want to leave behind?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I think there's always a gift. There's always a gift. It doesn't feel like it in the moment sometimes.
Yeah.
It feels like the worst thing that could possibly be happening for many people, but there is a gift in there, and you can shift your perspective to see it and find it. I also really believe that forgiveness is very important, and I do have a section of the book that is on forgiveness because there's a tendency for us as humans to not want to forgive because it rationally doesn't make a lot of sense. Most people think that if they forgive, it excuses any of the bad behavior. It erases anything that went wrong. It says, I accept what happened. And the truth is, that's not really what forgiveness is at all. Forgiveness is about choosing not to let the past disempower you, not to let the past suck your energy anymore. It doesn't mean that what happened was okay. It doesn't mean that the person is now somehow not at fault for whatever they did that was problematic. It means that you are no longer willing to hold on to the anger and resentment and animosity and bitterness that person is sucking out of you and your life. And also in this process, so often we have to forgive ourselves. And that might sound kind of strange, but so often in breakups, I find that after we get through I'm trying to forgive my ex for all the laundry list of things I can tell you that they did that are wrong with them, there comes a moment where someone will say, I compromised who I was. I lost myself. I acted in ways that I am not proud of. I also did things that I would have told you I wasn't capable of before I started dating this person or before I was in this relationship. And that also warrants forgiveness.
Yeah, and I've also heard the opposite and sort of like like feeling like, wow, like I really like disrespected myself. Like I just gave in all the time and accommodated, the other person's needs and things. So I hear the other end too.
Absolutely. All of that. And so learning to see yourself as you are and recognize that you are not perfect, nor was your ex, that actually we're all just human beings trying to do the best that we can with the information that we have at the time. And part of moving forward is acknowledging what you did to contribute to this dysfunction in your relationships and staring that down and acknowledging it, forgiving yourself for it, and deliberately making efforts to not do it again.
So, Courtney, I'd like to ask you 3 questions. Just give me the answers, whatever pops into your head.
Okay.
Early in the book, you give an example of someone who has been thinking about an ex for years, even after they married someone else.
Yes.
I believe it was, well, it doesn't matter. Gender doesn't matter. They clearly were thinking about someone else, an ex, even after they married somebody else. Is that a common thing?
Yes.
Ooh.
I think it's quite common. I think it's quite common to be curious about people you used to date. I think it's evidenced by social media. It's very common to look them up and search for them and to see what they're doing now. And I think if there was someone in your past that you were really in love with, it is very common to still think about them, even when you're in a new life with a new person.
Second question. What's the worst example of childhood learning you've ever encountered?
Oh my gosh, the worst example. I think that anytime I'm working with an adult or a child, I generally only treat adolescents and adults, but I have treated children at parts of my career who has fundamentally learned that they are worthless. It is one of the most difficult things to try to shift. Oftentimes, the early childhood trauma there is either abandonment or extreme neglect, sometimes physical and sexual abuse, such that they really don't believe they deserve to exist. When that happens, helping them learn to believe that they do is an essential part of actually having a healthy, intimate relationship with any romantic partner. Because if they don't believe they deserve to exist, the depression potential, the anxiety potential, the trauma-related responses that often accompany that come into romantic relationships and oftentimes put them in situations where they're recreating it with a new partner who actually treats them horribly.
Wow. Okay. One last question. If you could say one thing to someone who has had trouble giving up on an ex, what would it be? One thing.
Your value is independent from your ex. You are the same person with or without them. They do not define you.
I love that.
Very good. I do. So I want to be respectful of your time, for both of you. I'd like to give you each a minute to kind of summarize what's important with you. Courtney, we're going to give you the last word. So Erica, we're going to start with you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for joining us today, Courtney. This was wonderful and just sharing your expertise and all this. But yeah, so I think, to just like to summarize, the biggest takeaways are just to, pause and, if an emotion feels like too strong or too intense, right? The logic goes out the window, taking a pause to think about like, why is that? Where is this coming from? Feeling is not a fact. Feelings don't define you. And, and trying to kind of loop it back to, what makes you happy. Your emotions are valid, but it doesn't define you or, state of fact. And just, looking into your being real with yourself at the end of the day and whatever you want and need in a relationship and, being authentic and not living for others or through others. So.
Thank you. Courtney?
I want anyone who ever hears me talk to know that we're all on this life journey together, and that understanding ourselves in romantic relationships is part of that journey. If you find yourself going through a really rough breakup that is really rocking your world, such that you don't know that you can move on, you've lost yourself, you feel abandoned and lonely, I want people to know that that is really common. And it doesn't mean that anything is wrong with you. It means that you're a human being who had a very biological reaction to someone that you cared about, perhaps built a life around them, and is now going through the grief of loss and withdrawal. And that there is hope, that you can actually work with yourself to make this breakup something wonderful, with an outcome that will serve you immeasurably well as you move through the rest of your life.
Excellent. Thank you. I thought your book was outstanding. It gave a lot of tools, so I'd encourage people to take a look at the book. Obviously, many people need a little bit of assistance. I know you both work with clients in that regard, as does many others at Equilibria or other therapy practices. So I'd encourage people to go ahead and do that. Let me conclude by saying our sponsor today is Equilibria Psychological and Consultation Services, whose mission is to help individuals achieve their personal potential and long-term growth by compassionately and respectfully helping clients live in balance. Visit equilibriapcs.com, equilibriapcs.com. You can look for them on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. You can also look for me on Instagram, Daniel J. Gomez 24, and on LinkedIn. Now for the disclaimer. I am not a medical professional, and I am not providing medical advice. The opinion of our speakers is solely their own. This podcast is copyrighted and cannot be reproduced without the express written consent of EPCS Management, LLC.